it's always a special schus to come to the call to give a shiur, but today we also have our zvuluns that are together with us. From time to time, I spend some time with the zvuluns of this koil, and today we bring together the Yisachars and the zvuluns. So after we learned the Rivis for more than a year, and it was an amazing experience, we took some time to learn about the Zmanim, which was an even more amazing experience. I still don't know what we're going to learn on Cheshvan. I don't know, maybe we'll keep on with the Zmanim, I don't know. But today we will be discussing one of the most confusing and problematic sugyas in Halacha. And I just was speaking outside with the Rosh Koila and with my precious son-in-law, Rabbeinish, and I said it demands an explanation philosophically in Ashkofa. Why is it that some of the most fundamental yesodis in Halacha are so confusing? And one of them is the international dateline. Where does the day start? Where does the day end? And where does it start? So the concept of a certain nekuda in which the day starts wasn't relevant hundreds of years ago or thousands of years ago. And that would be the fundamental explanation why it's not discussed broadly in Halacha. Amudei HaHalacha, which are the Mishnah and the Gemara, the Rambam and his Noise Kalim, the Tur. They don't discuss where does the day begin and where does it end. Because in their days, Jews didn't live in Japan, Jews didn't live in Australia, or at least they weren't aware of any Jews elsewhere in the world. You know, it is a shocking revelation just to know, not a revelation, but a piece of information. 100 years ago, 80% of world, not 100, 150 years ago, 80% of world Jewry lived in Poland. 80% of Jews in the world lived in Poland. And Jews were centered in Eastern Europe, and a very small number of Jews in Eretz Yisrael. The Jewish issue in America goes back some 200 and somewhat years, but many years ago, Jews were all centered in Europe, and therefore it was not relevant. Nobody busied himself when is Shabbos or when is Yom Tov or when is Yom Kippur in the Far East. But as man began to explore and broaden his horizons, and when Christopher Columbus and Amerigo Vespucci, who were two explorers, European explorers, Italians, Spaniards, and in a very short time span, both arrived to America. Columbus arrived at the beginning, I think it's 1492 when he arrived in North America. And Amerigo Vespucci, and America is named after him, arrived in South America. And it was almost at the same time. Columbus did not know that he discovered a new world. He thought he arrived in India. And so it dawned upon him that the world is round and we could actually go around the world from one point to the other. And Vespucci was the first one that argued, no, this is a new world, it's not India. We are very far from India. There's a huge continent between Spain, Europe, and Asia. Because all they were aware of is the land mass that is Europe and Asia. And therefore Columbus thought that traveling west, he arrived in India. He was surprised that it took him such a short journey to arrive in India. He wasn't aware that he discovered a huge new world. So when people became aware that the world is round and there must be some nekuda, some point where the day changes. So it is only about 140 years ago, I think in 1884, that the international dateline was established, and there was an argument between European countries who's going to have the big kavod of being the center of the world, whether it's France or England, and as we know today, it is Greenwich, a little town, because they had an observatory, and they had the covet of being the center of the world. And the international dateline is totally arbitrary, and it was set in a place where it doesn't divide any land mass, just for practicality. Because it will be extremely impractical that people living in the same town, to some it'll be Sunday, to some it'll be Monday, and therefore the international dateline is not even a straight line, but it actually zigzags between, but the rationale was it should not divide any land mass. So knowing that the world is round and there is a necessity to determine a dateline, because otherwise, so early man, we don't know what Adam Rishon knew, but Adam Rishon became aware the first day of creation that it's not going to be light forever, and he was afraid when night came, and Motzei Shabbos he discovered fire. So in early days, people thought that the world was flat, and it's an amazing Zohar, that the Zohar writes that the world is round, and when it's day here, it's night somewhere else. Toises in the Resort of Mem Aleph, Toises brings a medrash that Alexander Mogdon rode an eagle, and he soared up to the sky, and from the heights, the world looked like a kadur. But Toises also says that the Okeanos looked like a karo. So obviously, what seems to be obvious, he wasn't aware that the world is round. Maybe it is round, but it's like a ball that's submerged, partially submerged in water. And that lachor is pshat and Toises daf Mem Aleph, ha'olam doime kekado, v'okeanos kekaro. So in this Sefer, Kavat Tarich B'Mkomot, I understand you examined many Sefarim in the Koilon, and my son-in-law Rabbeinish brought some to me. So here we have a picture, because many of these Sefarim, just to make matters clear, have pictures. So one of the earliest cartographers was Ptolemy, who was an Egyptian astronomer, and he had this ancient map, and the world to him seemed like a balloon or a round ball submerged in water. So they were aware of a half circle. And if the world is a half circle, even though it is round, but 50% is submerged in water and it's not inhabitable, so once again, we don't need a dateline. So the world starts b'mizrach, where we have sunrise, and it ends in Ma'ariv, and that is a 12-hour cycle, and that is the same day in the entire world. But when people became aware that the world is round, and we could live in the entire world, and you could travel, there was a necessity to decide, so where does the day start, and where does the day end? And it is amazing that Gedolei Hador dealt with this question only in the midst of World War II, when hundreds of yeshiva bochum and Jews escaped Europe, and they arrived in Kobe, which is a city in Japan. And then the question came up, when is Yom Kippur in Japan? And some Yerushalayim Gedolim came together, Tafshin Aleph, approaching Yom Neroim of Tafshin Beis to deal with the question, when would Shabbos be in Japan? So the international dateline is somewhere in the Pacific, and Japan belongs to the West. And according to the international dateline, Japan has the same day, the same Shabbos, the same Rosh Hashanah, the same Yom Kippur as we have in Israel, as we have in America. But according to the Chazon Ish, Japan is a day earlier. And there are three different opinions. And Banish, could you show me that advance here? Do we have the Jews that advance here? I would like to see it. So there are three fundamental approaches. And I think it is fascinating to read what the Gedolim wrote. The Chazon Ish has a gewaltige Kuntres Chai Shois, Yudches Shois. And the Chazon Ish really, in this sugi, went out of his way, which is not very typical of the Chazon Ish, very forcefully and very strongly. So, the Talmidim of the Midi Yeshiva in Kobe in Japan, after a short while they went to Shanghai, and Shanghai was, even according to the Chazon Ish, belonging to the West, so that was no longer a Shaila. Like Yom Kippur, Tovshi Beis, they were in Kobe in Japan, and that caused a huge controversy. So most of the people were from the Midi Yeshiva and others associated with the Midi Yeshiva. There are also many from Yeshivas Chacham Lublin. So as our world, there were Hasidim and Litvishim. And they got two different telegrams. One telegram was from that Sifa Serabonim that was in Yerushalayim. And the person that called together this Sifa was the Rabbi Rosh Harav Herzog. And the Pesh Pesach Frank was there, and the Bishop Zalman Meltzer. And the Gerer Rebbe wrote a letter referring to the Mechel Tekuchinsky. And they wrote, you keep Shabbos and Yom Kippur keminig hamokim, like all the others. And that means the same as in Eretz Yisrael. And the Chazon Ish wrote a different telegram. Toichlo ברביעי וצומו בחמישי ואל תחששו לשום דבר. You have nothing to be afraid of. Eat normally when all the others, the locals that were there years earlier, held Yom Kippur, and the Chazon Ish said no, and that day you could eat and fast a day later. So when they keep Shabbos, you could do malachas, and Sunday you keep Shabbos. That was the opinion of the Chazon Ish, very strongly. And the Shitosa, you don't even need to be machmir. Shabbos is not Shabbos, rather Sunday, and when everybody keeps Yom Kippur, that is Erev Yom Kippur. So when all the others fasted, you have a mitzvah to eat as much as you can, because Erev Yom Kippur, there's a mitzvah of achila. And the Chazon Ish felt very strongly about this. And so, what is the machlokes? And I think philosophically, many times we speak about darkei psak, darkei hairoa, and there are three different opinions, and I think each of the three opinions is based on one of the yesodis of our Messiah. One of the yesodis in darkei psak and darkei hairoa. So today's shiur, I see more maybe as one of our shiurim in darkei hairoa than going into actual details. Because we don't have a sugya in Shas dealing directly with the question of a dateline. The only sugya that is loosely associated is in Rosh Hashanah Daf Chof. In Rosh Hashanah Daf Chof, Chazal deal with Kiddush HaChodesh, with Riyas Alavona, with the Moilad. And according to the Balamor and the Kuzari, this sugya proves that there is a dateline. And where is that dateline? 90 degrees to the east of Yerushalayim. So around is 360 degrees. Don't ask me who decided that something that is round is 360 degrees. That is not relevant. But the globe is 360 degrees from any point if you go all the way around. So a fourth would be 90 degrees. So the Chazon Ish, based on the Balamor, says Yerushalayim is where the Shechina is, that is where Adam Rishon was created, and that is the center of the world. The day starts 90 degrees to the east, 180 degrees to the west. And according to the Chazon Ish, Japan is on the other side. And that is why Japan is a day earlier than Eretz Yisrael. And therefore, the Chazon Ish says, Japan, people living there, the Jews living there, held the same Yom Kippur as Yerushalayim because the international dateline pushes them west. But the Chazon Ish argued 90 degrees puts Japan to the east and not to the west, and therefore their day is a day earlier than our day. So according to the Chazon Ish, the Halachic dateline runs through huge land masses because Halacha doesn't take into account the practicalities. Would it be reasonable that two people living on the same block, and to one it's Sunday, to the other it's Shabbos? And what happens if a person walks over to his neighbor? So, and what if a person did a malacha in his house, because to him it is Friday, and could his neighbor benefit from that malacha? To him it's Shabbos. So according to the Chazon Ish, the dateline, which means Kavat Arich, goes through Upper Asia, Siberia, Philippines, what is most significant, Australia. So the Chazon Ish comes up with a new Chiddush, and he says, halachically, the dateline, Kavat Arich, would go to the east to include every land mass, which is once again a Gavaldik Chiddush. Why? So the Chazon Ish does put in some practical sense to a Mesoris Avishenu, because to the Chazon Ish, once again, it was unreasonable to say that Australia and Jews lived in Australia, it would be partially Sunday and partially Shabbos, or partially Friday and partially Shabbos. So that is the second Chiddush of the Chazon Ish. But the Chazon Ish argues 90 ma'alot, 90 degrees, and that is based on the Balamor and the Kuzari. Reb Michael Tikachinsky was one of the Chachmei Yerushalayim, and he was a great Talmid Chacham. And he argued, if Yerushalayim is the center, then the dateline should be exactly opposite Yerushalayim, which would be 180 degrees. And that is what common sense dictates. If Yerushalayim is the center of the world, then why would 3/4 of the world so coming to the west? And the new day starts 90 degrees to the east. So the Chazon Ish's opinion is based on Mesoris Avuseinu, Ein Lanu Elo Divrei Harashreinu. Even though we don't have an opinion of Amudei HaHalacha, no Rambam, no Tur, no Shulchan Aruch. The only source would be the Balamor and the Masechet Rosh Hashanah and the Kuzari. So the Kuzari usually is not considered the halachic source. I do not remember any other psak as much as I have learned anywhere in any halacha which is based on the Kuzari. We have such smart avreichim in the kotel. I'm sure that within the next day I'm going to be bombarded with tshuvas based on the Kuzari. But in my ignorance, right now, I'm not aware of any psak anywhere with Divrei HaPoskim that is based on the Kuzari. Rabbi Yehuda Levi was a poet, a philosopher. He is not in the list of the great poskim upon which based halachas. But here, after all, he's one of the Rishonim. And the Ravid, in his Asogas and the Balamor, quotes the Kuzari. Even though I think the opinion of the Ravid is contradictory to what we learn from the Balamor, and he quotes the Kuzari just understanding how the world spins and just the astronomical definition. But that is the opinion of the Chazon Ish. So the Chazon Ish argues we have Rishonim, and we cannot stray from the Rishonim. Which is interesting, because one of the Chazon Ish's I most quote is, and you probably are familiar with this quote because I use it all the time, Mutav lanu litchok belo shel haRishonim kedei la'amid et hadvarim al buriyam. And that's the Chazon Ish in Even Ezer Siman Mem and in Yodea Siman Ayin. But here the Chazon Ish says we have Rishonim, the Kuzari, the Balamor, and even the other Rishonim that give a different pshat in the Gemara Rosh Hashanah doesn't mean that they disagree with the fundamentals of the Balamor. The day starts 90 degrees to the east of Yerushalayim. The Mechel Tikachinsky makes a lot of sense. If Yerushalayim is the center of the world, then the day should start 180 degrees and not 90 degrees. The Mechel Tikachinsky in one of his letters also has an argument, which to me seems a very sensible argument, that maybe my opinion doesn't go against the Balamor. Because they said 90 degrees is because Mokum HaYishuv was only 180 degrees. If 50% of the world is submerged in water, and only fish could live there, and not human beings, then that part of the world would be irrelevant. So Yerushalayim is the center, and all we have is a half of the ball, half of the globe. And therefore 90 degrees would be, that's where the day starts. And the day ends, B'ktzei Hamarav, and what happens when the sun goes under the water? Well, obviously that's night, and that wouldn't be relevant to us. But now that the world has come out of the water, and people live everywhere, and there are huge continents and billions of people around the globe, then maybe even the Balamor would agree that it should be 180 degrees. Because the fundamental argument is the dateline is not Exeris HaKosov. Maybe it is. The Chazon Ish writes Mesoiros B'Yadav Yiseinu, but he doesn't use the language of Halacha L'Moshe Messinai. Practically, there must be a point where the day starts. But was that point Nimsa L'Moshe Messinai? Or is the point just logic? If Yerushalayim is the center, then it needs to be in the middle. So as long as the world was inhabited only Chelik Elyon, it's not exactly Elyon V'Tachten, but that's the way they saw it, and only 50% is inhabitable, and the other 50% people don't live, then it would be 90 degrees, Liyamin or L'Smol, L'Mizrach or Ma'arav. But if people live in the entire world, maybe we would need to update the dateline and put it 180 degrees. So maybe Tikachinsky's opinion would be acceptable even according to the Balamor and the Kuzari. But the Chazon Ish says, no. This is what the Rishonim say, and this is what we stick with. So according to the Chazon Ish, the dateline puts Japan to the other side. And therefore, when it's Shabbos here, it is Friday in Japan. And all those people that lived in Japan and they held Shabbos the same as Yerushalayim, that was a mistake. And the Chazon Ish says that needs to be fixed. Opinion number 3, which was Rapesh Pesach Frank and Rabbi Zalman. And their fundamental argument, and they both write this in their letter, if there would be a halacha that there is a certain dateline, how come it's not in the makoros of halacha? And they argue, ein din Torah in a dateline. It's just a matter of practicality. And there's a tshuva in Radbaz. Shaltu memeni yodiyachu da'ati b'inyan HaShabbos. כי יש חילה גודל בין השויכן במזרח לשויכן במערב, ונמצא שמו שהוא לאלו שבס ולאלו חול. So what about Shabbos? The Radbaz asks. So the Radbaz doesn't deal with the dateline, and he doesn't deal with the dilemma of where does the day start. I think that Radbaz, going back 500 years, wasn't aware that the world is round, and there must be a certain point where the day starts and where the day ends. So, when did we become aware that the world is round? Not so long ago. Obviously, it's in the Zohar. But the first to strongly argue that the world is round was Nicholas Copernicus, and then Galileo. And David Gans was a fascinating Talmud Chochem in the history of European Jewry. But David Gans was obviously a great Talmud Chochem. He wrote a sefer called Tzemach David. And he was a Talmud of two of the greatest Gedolim of his era. Two Gedolim that were very different. He grew up in Krakow, and he was a Talmud of the Ramah. And then he lived in Prague, and he was one of the Choshed Talmidim of the Maral Prague. And the Ramah and the Maral Prague don't have much in common. They were very different, and he was Mishamish both of them. He was an astronomer. He knew Galileo, and he saw himself as a Talmud of Johannes Kepler, who was the greatest astronomer of his age. And he lived in Prague. And David Gans writes that I spent many weeks in the observatory looking at the telescopes of Kepler, and I was fascinated by what I saw in the skies. So once upon a time, you could be a Talmud of the Ramah and the Maral and of Kepler. Today, it's not so common. And he was an astronomer and a researcher, and he contemplates the dateline. He doesn't quote the Balamora, but he contemplates, and he said, I spoke to my Christian friends. What do you think? I mean, days are important to you as well. You have your Sunday. And they were confused. They didn't know what to say. So David Gans lived 400 years ago. And that is approximately when America was discovered. And so the Radbaz just deals with the question, if it's light here and it's dark there, when is Shabbos? But the tshuva of the Radbaz has extreme significance in our dilemma as well. Da, Ishara zu navoicha bo rabim v'nechbodim, aval odiyachu dati. Da, כי השבס נמסר לכל אחד מישראל, אויסי ביני וביניכם, וכמו שאויסי בריסו לכל אחד ויחד, כן השבס נמסר לכל אחד ויחד. וכיוון שהשבס נמסר לכל אחד בכל מקום שהוא מויני שיש יומם, ובסוף השישה אויסי שבס, זו זכר למעשה ברישס. שאמן התרועים מכן, אפילו בעץ ישראל יש חילוק צס. ואפילו תרצלוי משל ידי את הספר, שעונים מוסיפים, but the Shabbos is not the same even in Israel, even in Eretz Yisrael. גדולים זו אמרו, המהלך במדבר ולא יודע עמוס שבס, מויני שיש יום מיום שתורם מקדש ויהיה מבורך ביחס היום ומבדל במצוי שבס. ואף על פי שאין היועסה בכל יום אלא כדי חיוב, רק משום שסופק, but he argues, ההולך במדבר. And he keeps Shabbos. When he comes back to a Mukim Yishuv and he becomes aware when is the real Shabbos, he does not need to do tshuva. He does not to bring to you korban, because where he was, and from his point of view, from his perspective, that is Shabbos. And he was Mekayim, the mitzvah of Shabbos, which is somewhat shocking. The point he tries to make is, just like your bris kodesh, everybody has his bris kodesh, everybody has his Shabbos. So wherever you are, that's your Shabbos. In Eretz Yisrael, Shabbos is earlier, Shabbos is later, but this is your Shabbos. I don't think there's any reason when he wants to solve his problem, what he was addressing, to go to the extreme and to say a mahalach b'midbar was mekayim the mitzvah of Shabbos. Shabbos is objective. Why doesn't he simply say Shabbos depends on Tzeis HaKechovim and Eloi Shachar and Tzeis HaKechovim once again? I don't know. So he doesn't speak about the dateline because obviously he wasn't aware how big the world is and that there's round, and all he's dealing with is it's earlier here and later there. So I didn't know why he needs to go to that extreme. But what he does say is Shabbos is relative, and Shabbos is different wherever you are, and wherever you are, that is your Shabbos. So the Bissa Zalman and Rav Hesh Pesach Frank said, wherever you are, where the people keep Shabbos, that is your Shabbos. So, how do we understand that Adbaz? One could say that Adbaz is based on Toikev HaMinag. And many times in the past, we spoke about the Cheshivas of Minhagim. And if this is the minhag of Jewish communities, me'az u'mekedem, then that is your Shabbos, Godol HaMinag. Or maybe it's far more profound than just Toikev HaMinag. Maybe the fact that our halachic sources don't determine where is the dateline, maybe that in itself proves there is no dateline. There is no dateline because the Torah doesn't say where it is. So what's going to be with Yom Kippur? Where people keep Yom Kippur, that's Yom Kippur. As if a Kodesh Baruch Hu says, Lakel goimer alai, what you will decide, your Chachamim, Bekol atar v'atar, that's going to be Yom Kippur. That's going to be Shabbos. I still would argue, but Mahalach B'midbar is different. There's no minhag, there's no Messiah, there is no community. You're doing your best. But at the end of the day, this is not Shabbos. So in any event, that Adbaz goes to a huge extreme. But what we learn from the Adbaz is maybe the very fact that we don't have an Asoris of Chazal where the dateline is proves there is no dateline. So how could it be there is no dateline? So when is Shabbos and when is Sunday? When Jews hold Shabbos, that will be their Shabbos. And that is based on the mere fact, on the very fact that we don't have a Messiah where the day starts and where the day ends.
God himself at the end of the tshuva, he's b'siachas about what? It's a question.
Yes. Yeah, but and thank you for pointing this out to me, but it just makes the argument stronger because he was aware of the dilemma. And he brings the Kuzli and the Esoderam and the Balamor, but what is his conclusion? His conclusion is wherever they're going to keep Shabbos, that will be Shabbos. Not 90 degrees, not 180 degrees.
He needs Vav Yom. He doesn't have Vav Yom.
What?
He wants Vav Yom. You don't have Vav Yom. Very often, if you change days, you're not going to have Vav Yom.
Wherever you are, you're going to have Vav Yomim. If you change days, that would be a different question. Wherever you are, if you stay put where you are, you're going to have Vav Yomim. And therefore, that is the Shabbos. So the fact that the Baz does quote the Balamor just makes his opinion far more significant. So these are the three fundamental approaches to the international dateline. The Chazon Ish. And the Chazon Ish's ikar argument is, this is what we find in the Rishonim. Even though we would be far happier if the Rishonim would be the Rambam and the Tur, the Ramban and the Rashba, but they're not. So all we have is Rabbeinu Zachya and the Kuzari. And some other Rishonim that aren't really considered Amudei HaHalacha.
It quotes the Ran, that the Ran is Mishabech,
Yes, the Ran and the Ritva both are Mishabech the Balamor. I don't think it means necessarily that their psak is in accordance to the Balamor, because they also offer a different pshat. It may be, to me it seems that they are Mishabech the interpretation and the presentation of the Balamor, but not necessarily that is their psak halacha. So the psak of other Gedolim Yerushalayim was twofold. Some of them based on the opinion of Tukachinsky, that if Yerushalayim is the center, that it would go without saying that it's 180 degrees. And the explanation, the argument of Rav Tukachinsky, that maybe my opinion doesn't even contradict the Balamor, I think to me that seems to be a valid argument. And that is opinion number 2. Opinion number 3 was based on Deret Bas, which is an amazing tshuva. And so those Gedolim that sent the telegram keep Yom Kippur together with all the others, even though there weren't Gedolei Yisrael in those Kehilas. They didn't have the Torah giants. But there was a Kehillah, and that was their minhag. And so those Gedolim that sent the telegram, keep Yom Kippur together with all the others, is either based on minhag or on Shuvas Bas, as indicated in the letters of Rav Pesach Frank and Rav Zalman Meltzer. And the Chazon Ish was very adamant. So the other Rabbonim wrote, keep Yom Kippur together with the others, but a day later, eat l'shiurim, because you can't fast 2 days. In Yerushalmi, we learned that Avua the Shmur fasted 2 days, Yom Kippur, and he died. He perished, because it's a Sekolah to fast 2 days. So Rav Herzog writes, I think the second day you should eat l'shiurim and be machmir. But the Chazon Ish saw no room to deviate at all from the Balamor, and he wrote, Ichlu b'revi, tzoimu b'chamishi, v'al tachushu l'shom davar. So this is a huge controversy and a very interesting shaila, and the shaila touches upon the yesodus of Mesodas HaHalacha, as I explained. So maybe at some other stage I will have more clarity, but I don't think I could have a personal opinion. Like Achnas Reishi ben Horam Gedolim, where so many great Gedolim are so adamantly opposed to each other, it's very difficult to have your own personal, but I would have some personal feelings. But today I just wanted to give an outline and analyze Yesodus Advorim. What are the different approaches? What are the different opinions? Va'alma adaneim udba'u. And what are the fundamentals of this sugya?
Does the question of Matthias that the Balmor didn't understand that the world had more Yishuv, that does not stem with the Rov's klal of Torah and Halacha and science, that Halacha reigns supreme, like by Tilas Neshama on Kenan, and on
I don't know. I don't know. I think this is different. I think this is different because, once again, Rabbeinu Tam comes to explain a Gemara. The Gemara Gimel Revei Mil. The question of insects and fish is a Gemara. Those are Gemaras. We're dealing with a discussion that has no source in the Gemara. It's more the Rishonim. Omnam it's pshat in the Gemara, but I don't know.
The Balmor thinks he's dealing with the Gemara.
But I think
Balmor seems to say it's part of Seder Ibur. That was it. The Chazon Ish claims the Balmor and the Seder is part of Seder Ibur.
it's not the same as Shittas Rabbeinu Tam, or the question of anisakis of worms or kinim, or killing kinim.
Why?
And especially if we accept the argument of Rav Tukachinsky that maybe the dateline is not necessarily fixed. And if people lived on half of the world, that would be the assumption that people don't live only on half of the world. That is That is what determined 90 degrees.
Well, if that assumption, the Gemara's knowledge of the Levana of 18 hours is not halachically true. Because now that we discovered the world, there's no place that's 18 hours later.
No, there is. It's the same place that originally led it. The point
the
is
words
that
18
the
hours don't
cheshbon
apply.
of the problem
Maybe
is
the
way the Balmor understands the sugya, the cheshbon in the Gemara should come out the same, regardless of whether the world is round or half.
Mm-hmm. And therefore, that would support the opinion of the Chazon Ish.
Right.
That 90 degrees should be forever.
The Chazon Ish himself wants to say that even if you didn't paskin the Gemara the way the Balmor understood, or the way that I understood, you could still say that all the other Rishonim really bad to agree to this klal because of some Masorah. But even without the Masorah, the Balmor himself seems to think that that's the Gemara.
Yes, but there's no reason to assume that all the other Shainim would agree to this if they have a different shot in the Gemara.
I think maybe the Chazon Ish was bothered by it. Why didn't the Rambam write and why
The
didn't...
Michel's argument, though, is would lead to the fact that 18 hours just doesn't exist because we switched days 12 hours later. So the words 18 hours of the Gemara are just lavdafka. It's only till we discover the other half.
We don't have the words 18 hours in the Gemara.
Well, the
Gemara does say
the
that.
Gemara says 18 tartis 3 and the Gemara says 24 hours.
Okay.
You'd have to change the Kviyas of Rosh Hashanah.
Quick does, they legally change the day. They legally change the day in the place according to Rabbis. They go from
Whatever you decide, like the international Dateline.
They don't
So
have,
they can change.
They actually did this actually on the Shabbos.
In the
They
mid
bought
Pacific,
Alaska.
in the mid Pacific,
They
there's
bought
an
Alaska,
island
which
that
actually
changed.
changed dates from Shabbos or to Friday.
Just 10 years ago, there's a little island in the mid Pacific that decided to switch over.
Yeah. Okay.
So
But
it
you don't have
changed.
to Vav Yavim. He wants to Vav Yavim Main. If you don't have Main and Vav Yavim.
According to that base, it would all depend on the Seder's voice in Makom.
If someone moved very quickly, meaning they were standing in one place and they circumvented the whole world, according to the Shlita Saradbaz, would he still keep what the minig is because it's musad on a minig, or would he keep his personal Shabbos? Because he made it come up a day faster or come up a day later.
Definitely not his personal Shabbos. So if we accept that at Baz with a midbar, maybe that would be his personal Shabbos. But I think it's very unreasonable that a person have personal Shabbos. I do think it depends on the Messiah of a place.
The Kuzari also, in one of the Masamat of the Kuzari, he says Lahedya that the guy made a mistake about their Kriyas of the days. He says, meaning he indicates that there are places where the minig is Saturday, and he says it's wrong, it's not Shabbos, Kafi, the Kuzari's Shita that he goes to.
I don't think that the Goyim at that stage, going back 900 years, have any opinion. It's just it was just that. Like the Radbaz description, just anybody decided whatever he decided.
That would be Kavel, if either advice.
Yeah. So in all honesty, I did not really learn the Iyun Maspik the Gemara Rosh Hashanah, and which is the basis of this whole discussion, and therefore my entire interpretation is more general, one of the various different approaches regarding the Dateline. So Be'ez Hashem, I don't think I'll have another opportunity to deal with this sugi and the koilel, but
It's Halacha Ma'aseh if somebody goes to these places.
I've been asked all the time. Okay, so I was asked to speak a bit about the upcoming Yom Tov, especially to our great Zevulons that are together with us. So now I speak to all the Zevulons. It's a pity you don't see your Yesachas. You could look around this room and see all these Gevaldig Yesachas, these great Talmidei Chachamim sitting here, and see their faces, how they live in Torah and how they love Torah. I think you would be very moved, and maybe you would be even greater Zevulons than you were up to today, because it's really such a very, very special koilel, and you have such special partners.
The Rav has water if he wants.
I did not drink. Did I drink?
No.
So we have Sholosh Regolim, and all the Sholosh Regolim, and Shabbos as well, Mikroi Kodesh, are all Zeicher Yetzias Mitzrayim. But each of the Sholosh Regolim is a Zeicher to a different stage and a different phase of Yetzias Mitzrayim. So all of you that are looking at me with tremendous rachmanis, it's not as bad. It's not as bad as it looks. It's not as bad as it sounds. I'm fine. I just have a bad cough, and I hope it'll go away very soon. Schus harabim ta'amod li. So of all the Shorosh Hagolim and all the Mekroi Kodesh, Pesach is the Zeicher Le'ikar Yetzias Mitzrayim. And many times I explain, it's brought in the name of the Baal Shem Tov, Korvo El Nafshi Ge'olo. Every Jew has his own personal Yetzias Mitzrayim. And our neshama is in Golus, in our body. And a person needs to redeem his neshama from the tithus of Olam Hazeh, and to bring it closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that is his personal Yetzias Mitzrayim, personal Geulo. And when we redeem our neshama from Olam Hazeh, from tithus, from Averis, that is our way to be Makar of the Geula Shalema. And that is the way the Baal Shem Tov explained concept, the Posek Korvo El Nafshi Ge'olah. So the three stages of Yetzias Mitzrayim, starting with Pesach. Pesach we were redeemed. And at Pesach we saw the most amazing miracles in history. Senes HaMakas, Kriyas Yamsuf. Kabbalah Satorah Shavuos was the goal. Zerach Weiss, ki b'tzeischem Mitzrayim tav denesu elikim al ha'ar hazeh. And Sukkot is the journey between Yetzias Mitzrayim and Kabbalah Satorah, between Kabbalah Satorah and Eretz Yisrael. The Anani Yaakov that accompanied us on our journey on the way. And at Geulas HaNefesh we find these same three points. Su Mirah, that is Pesach. Asay Toiv, that's Shavuos. And the Hachana, Avodas HaNefesh, the preparation that is required from every Ish Yisrael and Avodas Elokim, that's the journey. That is Sukkot. But what we need to remember more than anything else is Pesach, because the story of Geula started on Pesach. After hundreds of years in Golus, Kodesh Baruch Hu bo lakach as goy mekerev goy, and Kodesh Baruch Hu took us out of Mitzrayim, and that is when we became a people, and that is when we became a nation, and from Mitzrayim we traveled to Har Sinai, and that is when we were Makabel Torah in Sinai. So once a year we have the mitzvah of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim, but every morning and every night we have a mitzvah of Schilas Yetzias Mitzrayim. And a Minchas Osher, especially in the New Haggadah, Baruch Hashem, we have a New Haggadah Shel Pesach, Minchas Osher. And to me, it's always a tremendous simcha when a new sefer comes out. I think there are two people that to them every new Minchas Osher is a gewaldige simcha. It's a simcha to many others, Baruch Hashem, to hundreds, to thousands that learn in my swarm. But to me and to Bainish, it is a special simcha. Because whatever I do, he does, and I wouldn't be able to do what I do without him. And Shali v'Shalachem, in a way, Shalom. And I said this morning in the Koil in Ramot, I stopped counting. I don't know which sefer this is, but I wrote more than 30 Sefarim. And every new sefer is like a new child in the family. I don't know anybody that has 35 children. I assume that when your 35th child is born, you're a bit tired. I could only guess. And you no longer have the energy to dance and to sing. You know, it's a bit tiresome. But your 35th Sefer is the same simcha as the first one. And a Sefer is a Sefer, and every time a Sefer comes out, and you know that people wait for the Sefer, they're learning the Sefer. I cannot describe what that means to me. You know, we're looking for skusim in the world. And when you know that your Torah is learned by hundreds of people, by thousands of people, it's an amazing feeling and it's amazing spus. So, the previous ago that came out 22 years ago, and this is actually a Ponam Chodoshes Bolakan. So it's like a new Sefer, entirely new. And so one of the discussions I wrote about Barichas is what the Achronim deal with. Ma bein Zechira leSipur. What are the fundamental differences between the mitzvah we have every day, morning and night, and the mitzvah we have once a year, in Beleila Seder? And I wrote a few fundamental differences. But I also wrote B'derech Moshel. And this is a Moshel, don't look for it in the Mishlei HaMagid Medubin, because it's a modern Moshel. Most of the Mishalim we find in our Sefarim are about kings and servants. You know, almost every Moshel is about a Melech Gadol and an Eved. But this is a modern Moshel. So you buy a new cell phone. And there's a feature, you know, a one-touch dial. You don't need to put in 10 numbers to dial, just one touch, and you could dial any number. But to put all your numbers into the memory, into the system, that's nerve-wracking. You need to sit down, and you know, this will take me 20 minutes. It's a waste of time. Take a cup of coffee, sit down. No, for the next 20 minutes you're doing nothing else. You just gotta put in all your numbers into the system. But it's worth it, because at the end of the day, for the next 10 years, instead of every time needing to dial 10 numbers, you touch, it's a one touch and you get all the numbers, all the people you need. So it is the same. Once a year, and that is Beleila Seder, take your time. Don't take a cup of coffee because you have Dalet Koises, but take your time. Take a nap in the afternoon. Prepare this night, because it's a magnificent night and it deserves preparation and demands preparation. And this night, Kol Amar Belesaper Hareza Meshubach, Ad Shetachtefeno Shina. And if you do it properly all the year round, there will be no need just for one touch. All year round, it'll be enough just schira. All you need to say is Zecher li Yetzias Mitzrayim, and everything will come up. Everything you put into your system should come up, and there will be no need every day for Kol Amar Hareza Meshubach. Take your time, Beleila Seder. Chassidim say, why is the Leila Seder called Seder? Because it is the Seder of all year. So Yidden have many magnificent days, but the most magnificent night they have is the Leila Seder. And this is Alaylo Ki Yoim Yoyo. It's Alaylo Shekula Yoim. And once a year we say Halal by night. And the question is, it's a Mishnah in Megillah Daf Chaf, we don't say Halal by night. So it's only 1 year, once a year, Ashir Yelev, Chem Kalela Sadishchag. So there could be only two terutzim on this kasha. How come we say Halal by night? Either the Halal is different than any other Halal, or maybe the night is different than any other night. There could be no third teretz. There's only two ways to solve this problem. How come we say Halal B'Leila Seder? So the Ram brings in the nomen of Rav Hai Gaon, we don't say a brocha on Halal B'Leila Seder, because it's not Halal, it's Shiro. So maybe that is why we can't say Halal by night, but we could say Shir by night. But my second interpretation is, this night is not a night. This night is day, Leil Shemuri. Night usually indicates Golus. But this night was the end of Gans. This night is a night of Geula. This night is not a night of Midas Adin, it's a night of Midas Rachamim. And that is why this night is different than any other. And this is a Lailo Ki Yoim Yoyer, a Lailo Shekulo Yoyer. So, this is a very special night. And it's a night which we need to take advantage of. And to pass the message, Laman tesaper ba'ozne bincho, uven vincho, es asher zarati b'mizar, es oisai, asher samti bam. And I advise everyone, take your time, prepare for this night. So it is so common, you sit down in the Seder and the father takes 10 agodas and he starts, bluttling and looking here and looking there, looking for something, desperately, something to say. That's too late. You need to take a week before, 2 weeks before, prepare what is the message you want to convey to your kinderlach, to your grandchildren. Because this is so important. This is a night they will all remember. And it is a night that requires and justifies Chona de Rabba. We are in a difficult time. And Eretz is still at war, and every day people are dying. And we believe in the Koyach HaTorah. So I never speak politics, and I never speak about current affairs and current issues. But as you probably hear, there's also some people that are she'enam tzoro, maybe one way to say in Lamdei Torah. We could understand the feelings of people that don't understand why their kids are dying and others are not dying. But we know of the Koyach HaTorah and the Schus HaTorah, and what Chazal say, but that also demands from us to make more effort, as I've been saying for the past 6 months. If you're learning in Mismedish and others are fighting out in the field, that means that you also are called upon to make a special effort. Learn more, learn better, daven more, daven better. So many shuls 6 months ago started saying Tillim every day in the morning, and to my dismay I hear that many have dropped that. And I think it's so wrong. So I was in Chutz La'aretz. Every shul I visited in Mexico and America says Tillim after every tefillah. But not every shul in Yerushalayim does, and Chaval. So I think we still need to keep up our efforts in Talmud Torah, in Chesed, in Tefillah, and in Masim Tovim to be Ma'ir Rachamei Shemayim. So this coming week is already Rosh Chodesh Nisan, B'Nisan Nigalo, B'Nisan Nasidin Ligo, Daven to HaKodesh Baruch Hu, HaBeit Mishamayim Ure'ei, and you should see the tzoros of Klal Yisrael, ומי שאומר לו אילם די, יאמר את צורותינו די, and we should observe these days of גאולה, שהקדוש ברוך הוא ישלח לנו משיח צדקנו, ויבנה לנו בית מקדשנו וספרתנו, ושמנוך מן הצלוחים ומן הפסוחים במהרו וימינו אמן.